correction reflected there, no jurors present in the courtroom, the defendant present in court with counsel. Madam Clerk, do we have all, Mr. Clerk, do we have all jurors?
This is the Law&Crime.
Okay. How many more we missing? We don't know. We know from the call. I thought we would lose two. That was gonna be fun. In making an opening statement to the jury, I want to make sure before we got permission from the defendant so that you can make concessions on his behalf if you desire to do so. Is any addendum to that or additions to that?
No, Your Honor, I have gone over the opening with Mr. Campbell. Since to the opening we're given, we're not going to concede guilty in any charge. And the things that I intend to say now from Mr. Campbell has been said.
That's that's a question about an exhibit.
Yes, sir, Your Honor. The state intends to display a picture of Jerome and Dora Faulkner, a picture that we do intend to introduce evidence during the state's case in chief.
Any objection? You've been shown this and you don't object to it either?
No, sir.
We have notebooks and pens for the jury. Is any objection? I'm going to let these note. If you want to raise an objection, I will tell you here, you maybe you change my mind.
No objection. No, sir.
Anything further on behalf of the state?
Your Honor, we did have a discussion in chambers. We were provided yesterday with some additional discovery. We have uploaded that to the electronic system, and I believe if we could just have an opportunity to provide it over to the defendant at this time.
It's my understanding y'all had an opportunity to see it.
We actually have not seen it yet. My understanding is they're going to provide a paper copy, and I think we would, once we've reviewed it, make any objection to the appropriate detail.
Anything further to that?
Your Honor, we do not intend to use any of that during our case in chief. We could just have a second, I believe, Ms. Garrison retrieved from the staff's office.
Ms. Barrett's made copies of the jury sheets for you, so you know who's who. Sheriff will handle that. Anything direct to the defendant? Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
For anyone seated in the audience, if you have a cell phone, turn it off now. It would be embarrassing to have the sheriff collect it from you and you can have it at the end of the trial. You understand that, right? Stay ready to proceed.
Yes, sir, Your Honor.
Stay ready to proceed.
Yes, Your Honor.
What we'll do, Mr. Sheriff, is we'll call the names one at a time for the jurors. You must let them know that they can come out and take these signed seats. I'm going to do that after, not right now. You may call the jurors to the jury box, please.
Juror number one, Wanda Conrad.
thanks for coming back and being with us today. Mr. Clerk, if you will impanel the jury, please.
Members of the jury, you have been sworn and are now impaneled to try issues in the case of the state of North Carolina versus Eric Alexander Campbell. You will sit together, hear all the evidence, and render your verdict accordingly.
Ladies and gentlemen, now that you've been selected and impaneled to serve as jurors in this case, I want to explain to you the manner in which we will proceed as we attempt together to discover the truth in this case. First, the lawyers will have an opportunity to make their opening statements to you. The purpose of these opening statements is narrow and limited. It is just an outline of what the lawyer believes the competent and the admissible evidence will be. An opening statement is not evidence and must not be considered by you as evidence. Following these opening statements, evidence will be offered. Witnesses will be placed under oath and questioned by the lawyers. It may be that documents and other tangible exhibits will be offered and received into evidence. If an exhibit is given to you to examine, you should examine it carefully, individually, and without comment. It is the right of the lawyers to object when testimony or other evidence is offered which the lawyer believes is not admissible. Should this court sustain an objection to a question, the jurors must disregard the question and the answer if one has been given, and draw no inference from the question or answer, or that speculate as to what the witness might have said if permitted to answer. Should this court overrule an objection to any evidence, you must not give any such evidence any more weight than if the objection had not been made. Now, should this court grant a motion by one of the lawyers to strike all or part of an answer of a witness to a question, then you must disregard and not consider the evidence which has been so stricken. Now, during the course of this trial, it may be, in fact, I am confident that it will be, that questions of law will arise which will need to be heard and considered by this court out of your presence and hearing. Should this happen, I'll ask you to step back into the jury room for just a few moments. You should not worry or speculate as to what will take place here in this courtroom during your absence. We will merely be considering questions of law that must be heard and considered out of your presence and hearing. All of the competent evidence in this case will be heard while you are present here in this courtroom. When the evidence is completed, the lawyers will make their final statements or arguments to you. The final arguments of the lawyers are not evidence. They are given to assist you in evaluating the evidence. And finally, just before you retire to consider your verdict in this matter, I will give you further instructions on the law that applies to this particular case. At that time, I will declare and explain to you the law arising on the evidence, and then you'll be taken to the jury room to begin your deliberations. While you sit and while you serve as a juror in this case, you shall obey the following rules. And I'm going to tell you now that I'm going to repeat these rules to you at every recess period. We do that ad nauseum. But we do that because they are important, and you have to follow them. Many of these were encompassed in the jury responsibility sheet, which each of you got earlier in this trial, and which you signed. First, you must not talk about this case among yourselves. And the reason for that is our rules require that the only time or the first time the jurors can talk about this case is after they've been instructed by the court, after the lawyers have had an opportunity to make their closing statements to you, and of course after all the evidence presented. If you talk about this case before then, that's a form of deliberation and could cause us to have another trial. We don't want to do that. That's why you should not talk about this case among yourselves. The only place you may talk about this case is in the jury room when all jurors are present, and I've told you, you may begin your deliberations. Second, you must not talk about this case with anyone else or allow anyone else to talk with you or to say anything in your presence about this case. Now, that's a hard one. Because you're going to go home tonight and you're going to get next to your significant other and they're going to say, what did you do? And you can't tell them. Not only them, but anyone else. So be mindful of that. Should anyone communicate with you, attempt to communicate with you, contact you in any form, Facebook, email, you overhear something, you need to let the sheriff know about it right away. Third, you must not form any opinion, nor must you express to anyone any opinion about this case until I tell you to begin your deliberations. And what I'm trying to tell you to do there is to keep an open mind all the way through the trial of this particular case. I want you to hear a little bit of the evidence and decide how you think this case ought to come out. I want you to have the benefit of all the evidence presented, the benefit of the lawyer's thoughts, the benefit of my instructions to you on the law before you decide how you think this case ought to come out. 4, you must not talk with, communicate with, or have any contact with at all any of the parties, any of the witnesses, or any of the lawyers. And this rule applies not only here inside of this courtroom, it applies everywhere else in the whole wide world. And it prohibits any type of contact or conversation, whether about the evidence in this case, or what time did he say to come back, or where should I go to lunch, or any of those kind of things. If you have a question, you need to put it to one of the sheriffs. The reason for this rule is simple. We not only have to have actual impartiality in the jurors, we have to have the appearance of impartiality. And if you talk with anyone participating in this trial, we've lost that. So be mindful. Do not contact, say anything at all to anyone participating in this trial. We're going to give you badges that are going to say juror, so that will recognize you to other people so that they would know they shouldn't talk about this case in your presence or say anything to you. So you're going to need to wear those at all times here that you're with us. 5th, you must avoid reading, watching, listening to accounts of this trial. Your verdict must be based solely on the evidence presented in this case. Now, you'll notice we've got a television camera right there, and there'll be other people. They will not at any point film you. So don't worry about that. Just treat that like any other piece of furniture in this case. It doesn't bring any more importance to this trial. So be mindful of that. Don't do any individual inquiry or investigation about any issue touching on this trial. Tell jurors we don't require homework. We're going to give you everything that you'll need in order for you to return an appropriate verdict in this case. So don't go try to look up anything on your computers. Don't try to read any law books or periodicals or go to any other source to try to find something out about this case. We're going to give you everything you'll need in order for you to return an appropriate verdict in this case. Now, each of you must obey each of these rules to the letter. Unless you do so, there's no other way that the state of North Carolina or Mr. Eric Alexander Campbell can be assured of absolute fairness and impartiality. It is your duty, both while this trial is in progress, or while it is in recess, or while you're excused to the jury room, to see that you remain a fair and an impartial trial of the facts. And as a trial of the facts, it is your duty to recall the evidence. It is your duty to remember the evidence. The lawyers may not remember the evidence for you. I will not remember the evidence for you. It is your duty to remember the evidence. Now, after the lawyers have made their opening statements to you, I'm going to talk to you about notes in this trial. But that'll occur after they've made their opening statements to you. Now ready for the opening statements of counsel. Again, the purpose of these opening statements is narrow and limited. It's just an outline of what the lawyer believes the competent and the admissible evidence will be. Opening statements are not evidence and must not be considered by you as evidence. They may waive making an opening statement if they desire to do so. I don't think that's going to occur here. The defendant may reserve making an opening statement until just prior to presentation of evidence on his behalf if he desires to do so. If he wants to, he can make one after the statement. State desire to make an opening statement in this case.
Yes, sir, Your Honor.
Jury's been stated.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Jerome and Dora Faulkner. That is why we are here. They are why we are here. Jerome, we believe the evidence will show, was a father, a grandfather, a husband, an electrician by trade, a founding member of the Cornwall Volunteer Fire Department. Ironically, the same fire department that was called to his residence on January the 1st of 2015 to put out his house that was fully engulfed in a fire. That he was a deacon at Mountain Creek Baptist Church, that he was an usher, and that he was a friend. Dora Faulkner, we believe the evidence will show, was a stepmother, step-grandmother, wife, nurse by trade. She was employed at Central Regional Hospital. That she was a first responder with the Cornwall Volunteer Fire Department and the Cornwall Emergency Medical Service that was located up in their community. That when everybody else was moving away from an emergency, she and Jerome were running to save lives. That's how they spent their lives. She also, we believe the evidence will show, was a member of Mountain Creek Baptist Church. They had been for many, many years. Faithful members of their community. But on December the 31st of 2014, New Year's Eve, a night that should be filled with celebration of the year that's passed, full of anticipation and hope of the year that's to come. However, that night, Jerome and Dora Faulkner, we believe the evidence will show you, spent their last moments fighting for their lives against a brutal attack from two men, an attack that they never saw coming. December the 31st of 2014, the night we believe the evidence will show you that evil descended upon 8067 Highway 96 North here in Oxford, in the Cornwall community. The night that innocence and security died in that community, in our county. The night that the two of them watched one another die. We believe the evidence will show that the path that led to this was filled with deliberate decisions and conscious choices of this defendant and his father. Deliberate decisions and conscious choices that led to 8067 Highway 96 North, the home of Jerome and Dora Faulkner. That path, we believe the evidence will show, started in September of 2014, when the defendant's father, Edward Campbell, brutally assaulted his wife, Holly Campbell, in Alvin, Texas, miles and miles and miles away from Graham County. And that he assaulted her, and it was a brutal assault. But he was arrested for that and was in the Brazoria County, Texas jail. Was there awaiting trial for the charges of aggravated assault. And the assault, we believe the evidence will show, was brought on because of what Edward Campbell believed to be some sort of affair that was going on with his wife, Holly. And maybe somebody at work, or maybe a man named John Hilson, who was a friend of hers from many years ago when they were nurses together up in Canada. But Holly, I believe, will tell you that she hadn't talked or spoken with Mr. Hilson for several years. They did email one another back and forth. Holly, of course, had moved to Texas and started a life with Edward. Mr. Hilson had moved to Hillsborough, North Carolina, only about 45 minutes from here on I-85. The defendant's deliberate decisions, conscious choices. We believe the evidence will show that on December the 8th of 2014, that the defendant's father was bailed out of jail by his brother, Nicholas Campbell. But we believe the state's evidence will show you that this defendant was selling belongings, gathering up his money to bond his father out of jail. And that happened on December the 8th of 2014. And then on December the 18th of 2014, Edward Campbell did not show up for his court date to answer for his charges of the assault in Brazoria County, Texas. Instead, on December the 24th, he stole a Suburban from the New Waverly County school bus lot in Texas. The same Suburban that we believe you will see many, many, many times in this trial. We also believe that the state's evidence will tell you that on the same day, an officer named Jose Reveles, who was with the University of Texas Police Department, who was investigating and keeping up with this assault case, had a conversation, or at least spoke to the defendant, and told him, "You realize your father is a fugitive, and if you help him, you will be harboring and aiding a fugitive." We believe the state's evidence will tell you that on December the 24th, this defendant made a conscious choice, a deliberate decision to leave Texas with his father in that stolen Suburban. The path continues on, and the next time we believe that the evidence will show that you will see they are in a Home Depot in Greenville, South Carolina. Deliberate decisions, conscious choices. We believe that you'll see them purchasing drain cleaner, a very caustic chemical. We believe the state's evidence will show you that that same chemical was sprayed all over Jerome Faulkner's body. They purchased drain cleaner, a sprayer to put chemicals in, muriatic acid, chains, padlocks, and U-bolts. Conscious choices, deliberate decisions. The path continues to Kannapolis, North Carolina. On December the 29th, they go to a Walmart there, purchase gloves, goggles, things that you would need to suit up if you're going to use the chemicals that you just purchased. We believe that the path then continues to Hillsborough, North Carolina. Just down the road, I-85. We believe the evidence will show you that they stayed there for 3 days. December the 29th, December the 30th, and December the 31st. New Year's Eve. They purchased things at Walmart. We believe the evidence will show you that they were close to and went into the home of John Hilson. And then they made their way to Oxford, North Carolina. We believe the state's evidence will show you that a neighbor of Jerome and Dora Faulkner, Michael Weary, and his brother-in-law, Josh Boyd, were coming back from a hunting trip about 3:30, 4:30 in the afternoon. And they saw a white Suburban cut in front of them off of what they call the Sam Blackwell Dirt Road onto Highway 96. And they noticed how slowly they were driving past Jerome and Dora Faulkner's house. go on down to a neighbor's house, pull into the driveway of the neighbor. Michael Weary and Josh Boyd notice that they are out of place, and they study the folks who are in that Suburban. They remember it. Conscious choices, deliberate decisions. We believe you're going to hear from a neighbor, Wilma Owen, who is going to tell you that she spoke to Dora and Jerome on the phone around 6:15 New Year's Eve. Jerome and Dora had called to check on her husband, check on some other folks in the community, because they're interested in the lives of the people around them. And they had a conversation with them. And as far as we know, Miss Owen's the last person to talk to Jerome and Dora Faulkner. When the evidence comes in about the injuries on Dora's body, the injuries that she sustained, and the injuries on Jerome's body, the injuries that he sustained, listen closely to the testimony of 2 different medical examiners who did the autopsies on their bodies. Pay close attention to the number of injuries that they find and report. Pay attention to what they say about the length of time that it took them to conduct the autopsies because their injuries were so severe and so multiple. Pay attention to what they say about the different types of injuries, about the different modalities of death that Jerome and Dora Faulkner suffered. Listen as you hear from a veterinary pathologist who will tell you about Jerome and Dora's dogs, Callie and Toby. About the number of injuries that they sustained, and about the severity of the injuries that they sustained. Listen, pay attention to that evidence. Conscious choices, deliberate decisions. We believe the state's evidence will show you that after the defendant and his father brutally murdered Jerome and Dora Faulkner, that they then looted and pillaged their home. That the defendant drove to Walmart in Oxford, and that the defendant's father goes into Walmart, buys the huge Rubbermaid totes to fill up all of Jerome and Dora's belongings into the totes. He buys lanterns, lantern fuel, propane, things that you would need to burn down a house. In fact, the house was burned. We believe you'll hear from Doug Logan, the fire marshal, who will tell you that, in his opinion, that this was a man-set fire. Finding the same things that they bought at Walmart burned in the house. Conscious choices, deliberate decisions. They left, this defendant and his father left nothing behind for the Faulkners' children because they burned everything that they didn't take. The house was fully engulfed, fully involved. But Jerome and Dora's bodies and the bodies of their dogs, we believe the evidence will show you, did not remain at the house. They stole Jerome's truck, and they put the bodies of Jerome and Dora Faulkner in the back of the truck along with their dogs. Just threw them in the back of the truck, covered them up with a mattress, and continued their path of destruction up Highway 96 North. We believe that you'll see this defendant interact in several different convenience stores along the way. Several stops in Virginia as they're getting out of town, making their way out of town. Several stops, but I don't think that the evidence will ever show you that anybody, this defendant or his father, asked for help. Alert anybody to what's going on. Conscious choices, deliberate decisions. And the path of destruction ends in Lewisburg, West Virginia. Thankfully, we believe the evidence will show that the Suburban that had been stolen from New Waverly, Texas, also had a stolen license tag on it. It was stolen from a lady named Miriam Hogan who lived in Hillsborough, North Carolina. And Miss Hogan reported her tag stolen to the local police department. They do what police officers do and enter it into something called NCIC, which is a database that houses that information. And that when the Suburban that this defendant was driving crosses into West Virginia, they have a license plate reader. And that it reads the tag and it alerts officers with the Lewisburg Police Department that there is a white Suburban on I-64 West that has a stolen tag on it. It's New Year's Day. The folks from the Lewisburg Police Department, Lieutenant Jeremy Dove and Officer Nicholas Sams, were finishing up with a parade. They said, we'll respond to the interstate. Check it out. So we believe they're going to tell you that they came onto the interstate and that they saw the Suburban matching the description. They saw the North Carolina license tag matching what had been reported stolen in NCIC. And they made a traffic stop. But the Suburban's not the only car that stopped. The Suburban was following a red truck. It also stopped. This defendant, we believe you will see, gets out of the driver's seat of the Suburban at the behest of Lieutenant Dove. And then he comes back. Lieutenant Dove is asking him about the license tag. The defendant doesn't ask for help. Doesn't say anything about the bodies that are in the back of the truck. Walks to the officers, acts as if he doesn't understand what's going on. At that time, his father, Edward Campbell, gets out of the red truck and walks up to the officers. Moments later, opens fire on Lieutenant Dove and Nicholas Sams. This defendant, conscious choices, deliberate decisions, runs to the truck where the bodies of Jerome and Dora Faulkner are in the back and takes off driving in that truck, Jerome Faulkner's truck. We believe the state's evidence will show you that he wrecked that truck close in time, not too very far away from where the shootout happened, down a median, where in West Virginia, medians look more like mountains, perhaps, rocky ravines. And that officers from the Lewisburg Police Department, the Greenbrier County Sheriff's Department in West Virginia, and the West Virginia State Police were all arriving to the scene because 2 officers had been shot. Edward Campbell was also shot, and he was on the scene with them. We believe you'll hear from Sergeant Jeff Vance, who will tell you that he saw the red truck down in what the folks from West Virginia call the divide. We here in North Carolina would call it the median. And that he has to climb down basically these mountains to get to this truck. They find the passenger door open, but nobody in the truck. And that's when Sergeant Vance makes a gruesome discovery. Jerome and Dora Faulkner's tortured, brutally attacked, savagely murdered bodies in the back of the truck, covered up with a mattress and a tarp, chained down. along with their dogs in the back of the truck. Conscious choices, deliberate decisions. We believe that you'll hear from the West Virginia State Police who investigated this crime scene, as they referred to it as. We believe you'll hear from Sergeant Trooper Wade, who came onto the scene the next day and found Dora Faulkner's wallet, her pocketbook, all kinds of jewelry, her credit card, buried and hidden in the wood line there in the median, along with the .22 caliber pistol that had also been buried in the wood line. Receipts from Oxford, North Carolina, dating back to early December. Receipts from Kannapolis. Buried and hidden in the wood line. Conscious choices, deliberate decisions. Trooper Wade collected all of that evidence. We believe that you will see it. Listen closely as you hear from the testimony from all of the forensic examiners. The examiners who we believe will tell you that the .22 caliber pistol that was found in the wood line fired the bullet that went into Jerome Faulkner's leg. Another injury that he sustained. Listen to the analyst who analyzed the chemicals that were found in a bleach sprayer in the back of the truck and a handheld sprayer that was found in the Suburban. Listen to detectives from the Granville County Sheriff's Office when they tell you how packed full of stuff the Suburban was. Jerome and Dora Faulkner's belongings. Conscious choices, deliberate decisions. There's a lot to cover. We thank you in advance for your time and attention, for listening, for using your common sense and your reasoning as you listen to the evidence as it comes through the witness stand and through exhibits and pictures. We're going to start with the end here, where this gruesome discovery of Jerome and Dora Faulkner happened, where the folks in West Virginia discovered Jerome and Dora and gave us an opportunity to fight for them here in this courtroom. Listen, pay attention, use your common sense and your reasoning, and we know that at the end of this trial we will have proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty of the first-degree murder of Jerome Faulkner, of Dora Faulkner, the cruelty to their 2 dogs, the arson of their home, burglary, and robbery. Thank you.
Mr. Campbell, desire to have another statement made at this time.
Yes, sir.
Curious what you think.
Eric Campbell did not kill Jerome and Dora Faulkner. Ed Campbell, his father, killed Jerome and Dora Faulkner. This case is about a father and a son who had different goals, had different desires. Ed Campbell's goal was to kill, to rob, to steal, to hurt. And Eric Campbell's goal was to survive. Ed Campbell killed the Faulkners, and Eric Campbell was a witness. The deaths of Mr. Jerome Faulkner and Mrs. Dora Faulkner is an undeniable tragedy. Their deaths were senseless. There's a lot of people that are here that are their loved ones, that are their friends and family, that have suffered unimaginably. And nothing we will say through the course of this trial will attempt to dissuade anyone of that. That's the fact. But the evidence will show that Ed Campbell caused that tragedy. That Ed Campbell is the reason for their suffering, not Eric Campbell. During this case, you will learn how all kinds of different folks interacted with Ed Campbell and what they did to stay safe from him. Because Ed Campbell was mean. And Ed Campbell was cruel. Ed Campbell was the kind of guy that could just hurt you without hesitation, without warning. And Ed Campbell was terrorizing people long before the events that took place in this case. The evidence will show that Ed Campbell was married to a woman named Valerie Campbell, Eric's mother. They had 3 children together, Eric, his older brother Nick, and they had a daughter named Michelle, who was born somewhat disabled. In 5 weeks after she was born, she died under mysterious circumstances. Eric's mother, Valerie, when he was 4 years old, suffered a brain injury, again under mysterious circumstances. And Eric and his older brother Nick were left in the sole care of their father, Ed Campbell. And growing up in the home of Ed Campbell was a scary place. You will hear that Ed Campbell threatened his neighbors. An 86-year-old man, his neighbor. Ed walked right up to his face and said, "I'm going to kill you." And he didn't even know why. The neighbor didn't even know why. Ed Campbell was a scary guy to have live next door to. Neighbors' dogs were poisoned. Neighbors' dogs were shot. Ed Campbell had other girlfriends after Eric's mother had an aneurysm. Eventually his mother was in a wheelchair, couldn't communicate, and ultimately was in a nursing home. And Ed Campbell threatened and abused and mistreated every one of those women. Punched them, hit them. In front of the children, away from the children. And Ed Campbell assaulted other adults that had no relation to him. You'll hear in this case about a trip to Mexico when Eric was 8 years old. And on the way back, someone rear-ended Ed Campbell. And without hesitation and without warning, Ed Campbell got out of the car with a tire tool and hit the man in the face. And Ed's violence wasn't limited to adults. It included his children. It included Eric. It included Nick. Later, Ed Campbell would marry a woman named Holly Smook, who became Holly Campbell. They would have 3 children together, Alyssa, Matthew, and Isaac, who were much younger in age than Eric and his brother. And he would assault them too, give them black eyes. Punch them, children. And that was Eric's childhood growing up. You put too much sugar in the Kool-Aid, and Ed Campbell, his father, would throw it on the ground, tell you to clean it up, kick you while you're down there. One time Ed Campbell took a gun and hit his son in the face with it. Hit Ed Campbell with the butt of a gun. The situation was so bad that the Department of Social Services in Texas got involved. Briefly, Eric and his brother were in foster care. And the Department of Social Services in Texas made a finding that Eric and his brother had been neglected and they had been physically abused. But despite that, Ed Campbell did some classes, went to some court hearings, and Eric landed right back in the control of his father. That's what Eric always experienced. Whether Ed was beating a girlfriend, threatening a neighbor, hitting someone with a tire tool, when it was over, Eric Campbell was back in his dad's control. And the effect of that life, of that childhood, for Eric Campbell was he learned how to stay safe from his father. He learned to be passive. He learned that when his dad was punching him in the face, don't move, don't run away, don't fight back, don't argue. The safest thing you can do is lay there and take it without moving. And he learned to take his mind far away, to just pretend that these things were not happening to him, to escape and imagine something else is happening and wait out the storm. But despite this horrendous experience of living with Ed Campbell, Eric Campbell loved his father. And he loved his father because that's what children do. Family relationships are complicated even in healthy situations. Now, Ed Campbell, Eric's father, was a nurse. And he started using drugs at some point from work. Taking drugs, using them. And in 2006, he got arrested in a parking lot. He had some of these drugs from work. And in 2007, he got caught stealing drugs from work and ultimately lost his license as a nurse. Now, 2007, Eric would have been 14 years old. His dad was married to Holly at that point. They either had one child of the younger children or another one was soon on the way. And it was a watershed event for the family because that was the year that Ed Campbell could no longer get drugs from work and he started making methamphetamine in his home. And Ed Campbell used the family to make his methamphetamine. There's a rule about how much Sudafed you can buy every month. And so he had his son Eric, his son Nick, his wife Holly, anyone he could find, buy Sudafed for him so that he could keep making his meth. And he pushed meth on the family. He would say, try my new meth. Take this. And Ed Campbell's a very hard person to say no to. After Eric Campbell graduated high school, Ed Campbell wanted him to stay in the home. You see, Ed was making his money at that time to the extent he was making money by working in the home. He did metal fabrication, he did odd jobs, he briefly was a truck driver, and he also spent a lot of time making meth. And he wanted Eric to do that with him. See, Holly went to work every day. Holly Campbell, his wife. And he wanted Eric to stay at home, take care of the kids, and when Holly was home, he wanted Eric to work in his shop and make meth with him, and make metal fabrication with him, and do odd jobs with him. And for 2 years, that was the scene. And Ed, not always, but often, was pushing meth on Eric. And Eric often took it. It was just easier to get along with his dad if he would take it. Or if he said no, then Eric would be tired at the end of the day. And his dad would say, well, now let's start on this concrete project. You'll see pictures of this house. It's 100 started projects and no finished projects. And he'd say to Eric, we need to dig this hole today. And Eric was tired. And he'd say, well, you're not working hard enough. You need to take this and you can work hard. And in the fall of 2002, when Eric was 19, 20, he went out and he got a job. He got a job at Dish Network. And he told his dad, look, I'm not going to work with you anymore. I'm going to make money at Dish Network. Now, lots of kids, when they're 19 and they don't have a job, their parents say, you really got to move out. You got to make your own way in the world. But for Ed Campbell, it was such a betrayal of Eric getting a job outside of the home that he kicked him out. And Eric moved a couple different places, but ultimately ended up living with his best friend, Shane Warman's grandmother. She had a little piece of land. She had a garage out back that Eric could stay in. There wasn't plumbing, but it was safe. It was his place. And Eric continued to go home and see his dad and see his little brothers and sisters. He still had contact with the family. But Eric made a lot of progress being away from his father. He worked at Dish Network. Then he worked at a wastewater treatment plant. His Aunt Sherry Barnes, who lived on the other side of the country in different places, he spent a summer with her. She worked at a place called Spartan Race that set up obstacle courses in Canada. And he was there for a summer and worked hard, did a good job. Came back to Texas, and he was in school, trying to get his HVAC license. And he was making good grades. And he had a job working in HVAC repair. And during those 2 years where Eric got away from his father and was moving in a great direction, his father just got worse and worse and worse. His father was a meth addict, and he looked like it, and he acted like it. He was paranoid. He put up a wall between his neighbor's house. He had cameras. If you came in the house with a cell phone, he'd make you take the battery out of it because people are watching. Neighbors would describe him as being in the backyard in the middle of the night in just his whitey tights, looking like a zombie. And his relationship with Holly went from bad to worse. Ed Campbell was threatening her, was convinced she was cheating on him. He was seeing shadows. Was convinced that she was going to leave him too, just like Eric did, and just like Eric's brother did. There were incidents in the home of Ed shooting a handgun off inside his own home. That's how bad things were. And then on September 20th, 2014, things came to a head. And Ed Campbell viciously, brutally assaulted his wife, Holly. I assume the pictures that you'll see, that show bruises all over her body, he tied her up, he beat her, he threatened her with a gun. He had the children come in so that she could say goodbye to her children. That night, very easily, Holly Campbell could have been killed, and she knew it. And she did everything she could to survive. She survived by using her wits, by begging, by luck. And she didn't fight back. She just kept telling him, Ed, it's okay. It's going to be okay. I'm not cheating on you. We all love you. We just want the best for you. And eventually, Ed Campbell fell asleep. Passed out, more likely. And Holly Campbell was so afraid that she snuck out in the middle of the night. She left her children in the home with him. She called 911, and she sounds terrified in that call and tells them what has happened. And the police come and they arrest Ed Campbell and put him in jail, September 20th. Now, from jail, Eric and his brother Nick, they have calls with their dad. They go see their dad. Ed Campbell calls his sister, Sherry Barnes, Eric's aunt. And Ed tells them a bunch of lies. He tells them, me and Holly, we always argue, but she's just setting me up. This isn't real. I didn't really beat her up. It's mostly her fault. I can prove all this if I can just get out. And they don't really know what to think. They've seen the bad dynamic between them, but they don't really know what happened that night. But more importantly, Ed Campbell's facing 5 or 6 years in prison and tells his sons, I'm going to kill myself if I don't get out of prison. If I have to go to prison, I'm going to kill myself. And they believe him. And so they raise money, they sell property from the home. Nick has a better job than Eric. He's able to save up more money. I don't know exactly how much the bond was, but it was enough that it was a struggle for them to get together. Their Aunt Sherry kicked in some money. And then about 3 months after his arrest, on December 8th, they have enough money. Nick's going to bond them out. And right before they do, Eric has a phone call with his Aunt Sherry. And he says, Aunt Sherry, do we really have to bond him out? If we do it, you don't understand. We're just going to be his slaves again. And Aunt Sherry gets upset and says, this is the absolute worst experience of your father's life. Family is so important. Your dad needs you right now. And Aunt Sherry feels a tremendous amount of guilt. Tremendous amount of guilt for that. And they bond out Ed Campbell. And of course he doesn't have evidence to prove his version of events. And he's telling his sons, we're going to get our family right. Tells them, I can't go back. If I go to prison, I'm going to kill myself. And he tells Eric to gather some supplies to go camping. And among the things he tells him to bring are bows and a crossbow and a spear. And none of these things seem that odd to Eric. They've gone camping before. They've had those kind of things for hunting and other reasons. And his dad's always been into weapons. He throws spears in the backyard. He shoots bows in the backyard. And though they'd been camping many times before, they'd never been on a camping trip like this. I mean, Eric knew his father was running from the law. And from the very beginning of this trip, Eric and his father have two different plans, two different goals, two different mindsets. Ed's just trying to get out of town, maybe get some sort of vague revenge against his wife. He's also talking about, I'm going to get her, talk to her, and she's going to love me again. Eric's goal, he knows his father has been clean from drugs for 3 months. His goal is, I'm going to save my dad. I'm going to keep him from committing suicide. I'm going to keep him off drugs. I'm going to show him just how much I love him. And maybe he'll finally be the dad I want, but he'll love me too. And it was a naive plan. And it was a bad idea. And Eric Campbell got in the car with his dad, and they started traveling. His dad said, stop here, and there's this white Suburban. And Eric says, what is up with this white Suburban? And his dad said, it's mine. And he has a key to it. And Eric is suspicious. He thinks, I don't know how my dad would possibly buy a white Suburban. And he thinks it's probably stolen. And later on their trip, he knows it's stolen because his dad stops and he gets a license plate and changes license plate. And Eric is still just kind of hoping for the best, that he's going to save his father. It's a child's plan. And they drive across country. They camp sometimes. They just park on the side of the road. Eric keeps asking his dad, are we going to go to a state park? Are we going to go to a national park? Are we going to go to the mountains? And they keep parking on the side of the road and finding just land that doesn't have a house on it. And they go and make sure there's nobody in the area that can see them, and they throw up a tent. And that's their camping. Sometimes they sleep in parking lots, just in the car. And they stop different places, and one of the places they stop is a Home Depot, and they buy some camping supplies. But his dad also buys, Eric's father buys, these sprayer containers like you would use for spraying weeds. Drano, which is lye. That's one of the ingredients in Drano. Hydrochloric acid. And Eric sees this and he says, my dad is going to start cooking meth again, because those are all things you use to make meth. And he tries to reason with his dad. He says, you don't need to make meth, Dad. You don't need drugs. Let's go hiking. We're going to get it all together. And Eric is happy that his dad doesn't buy Sudafed. And he's thinking, well, maybe I convinced him that he doesn't need to do that. And at some point, Ed Campbell runs out of money. Eric still has some money, and he still has access to money. He's got grant money coming in and other things. But Ed Campbell's out of money, and he starts talking about it. Now, Ed Campbell, you got to understand, just talks and talks and talks. There's some detectives that brought him from West Virginia down to North Carolina, and he just talks and talks. He's inappropriate. He's bizarre. And you kind of have to zone him out. But one of the things that Ed Campbell starts talking about is how he's going to get money. And his dad always has schemes. Many of them are pretty horrible. He says, I can rob a store, I can rob a house, I can steal someone's identity. And Eric is trying to reason with his father. He says, Dad, you don't need to do that. We'll just call Aunt Sherry. She'll send us some money. We'll call Nick. We're both handy. They are. Both Eric and his father are the kind of guys that are jack of all trades. He says, we'll just go on Craigslist. We'll find someone that needs some plumbing work or some sheet wall work. We'll sell all this stuff in the Suburban. They brought half their house in the Suburban. And Dad doesn't want to hear that and says, well, let's just, we'll just stop for the night. And Eric thinks they're just camping again. And they pull over into a field. And they get out. And Eric's dad hands him a backpack and puts the backpack on himself. The night before, when they were camping, his dad had kind of rearranged the car, reorganized some things. And Eric starts what he assumes is what they always do, is we're going to look and make sure there's no house. We don't want to wake up in someone's backyard. And his dad had a crossbow backpack on. They'd seen a deer in a previous place, and his dad had talked about, maybe we could shoot a deer. And they start walking, but instead of making a loop like Eric was expecting, his dad wants to go down these side paths. And Eric kind of says to his dad, what are you doing? We need to make a loop. And his dad, shushes him and gives him a kind of mean, I don't want to do that. And Eric knows that there's no reasoning with his dad when he's like that, so he gets a little distance between him and his dad. And eventually they get to a tree line. And he sees his dad, instead of avoiding houses, going closer to the house. And Eric kind of runs to catch up, and he says, "Dad, what are you doing?" His dad says, "Shh, shh." And then Ed Campbell walks up to Jerome Faulkner's door and knocks on it. And Mr. Faulkner answers the door, and Ed Campbell asks, "Can I use your cell phone?" Or "broke down," something like that. And Eric's thinking, maybe he just wants to, call Nick. Because they don't have cell phones. His dad's paranoid of cell phones. Didn't bring any cell phones on the trip. And then his dad either gets let in or pushes his way past Mr. Faulkner. And Eric starts hearing horrible noises. And what goes through Eric's mind is, "Oh my God, my dad is going to rob these people." And he hears a gunshot. He doesn't know if his father's been shot or if his father has shot someone. He hears screaming. And just like all those times when he's a kid, when he sees his dad do violent things or when he does violent things to him, Eric can't think. He just can't imagine what has happened. And he's terrified. He feels helpless. And before he knows it, his dad is back, and his dad grabs him by his shirt, and he says, "Why didn't you back me up?" Pulls Eric into the house. And at that moment, once again, Eric and his father had two very different goals. Ed Campbell's goal was to rob the Faulkners, to hurt them, to take their things, burn down their house. And Eric Campbell's goal was to survive. And Ed Campbell kind of pushes Eric up against the wall, grabs the bag, and there's a spear inside of it. And Eric, all he can see is Mr. Faulkner with an arrow sticking out of his head. And he knows that the arrow's not supposed to be there. And his dad kills the Faulkner, kills their dogs. And Eric doesn't watch. He can't even really process what's going on. And his father tells him to go look for any financial documents. There's a little office area or something in the Faulkner's home. And Eric does. And his father has just shot two people with a crossbow, with a handgun. He's beating them. And Eric starts looking for it. "Whatever you want, Dad." And in that room, Ed Campbell just rants and raves. And he tells Eric a whole bunch of horrible things from his childhood. He tells him that he's responsible, that Ed Campbell is responsible for killing Michelle, who would be Eric's older sister. He berates Eric. He even tells Eric, "If you'd have just backed me up, none of this would have happened." He tells Eric, "They said I was going to try and kill Holly, but I wouldn't kill Holly. She's the mother of my children. But you don't have that excuse." He tells Eric that family backs each other up. And if you're not family, you're just dead weight. Eric gets the message. And then around 11 o'clock that night, there's a power outage. Just happens to be a power outage in at least that portion of the county. And it kind of spooks Ed Campbell. And he says, "Okay, we got to get out of here." So they go back to the Suburban. And Eric drives his dad to the Walmart. And as he's driving, there's no cars on the road. It's a blackout. And Eric is just, his mind is racing. He doesn't know what to do. What should I do? They get to Walmart. His dad tells him to park up close to the front. His dad gets out and goes inside, buys those blue bins, buys some camp fuel. And Eric is left alone in the car. And Eric is in that car, and he is trying just as hard as he can to come up with a plan, a goal. What can I do? And he just can't think. I mean, it's like all those times when he's a kid. His mind just goes somewhere else. And he's thinking, well, I could try and drive away, but what if this is a trick? What if my dad's testing me? Or will he just kill someone else and take their car and come after me? And then his dad is back. And they go back to the Faulkner's house. And back at the house, his father starts loading up different things into the different cars and tells Eric to load things up, and he does. And at some point, his dad wants to move the Faulkner's bodies because he has the idea that he's going to make a mask of their faces and steal their identity. And he can't do it. It's just too heavy. And he says, Eric, help me. Eric does. Eric helps him move the Faulkner's body into the back of their truck. And then his dad pours gas in the house and then lights the house on fire. And at some point, he takes a .22. His dad takes a .22 that was taken from the Faulkners. And he reloads it. And he goes to Eric and he puts that gun right in Eric's jacket pocket. And he says, this was their gun. It's your gun now. Next time you better back me up. And his dad gets in the Faulkner's truck. Eric gets in the Suburban. And his dad says, follow me. And they drive and they stop at some different places and get gas and different things. You'll see some videos of that. Eric goes inside. He has like a wintry mask around his face. His dad tells him to keep his face covered, but yet his dad never has his face covered. And they drive on. And then when they are in West Virginia, there's a camera on the highway that can read license plates, and it reads the license plate in the Suburban that Eric is driving. And it comes back as a stolen plate. And officers pull him over. And Eric is now driving, and he's still terrified and he's exhausted at this point. And there's lights behind him. He knows he's got to pull over, but his dad said, follow me. So you'll kind of see in the video, he kind of follows his dad. He doesn't really know what to do. Eventually pulls over. The officer tells him to get out of the car. Eric does. The officer asks him about registration. And meanwhile, his dad has parked the truck, left the door open, left the keys running, and walks right behind that Suburban, right up to where the officers are. And there's two officers in the immediate stop and another officer who's arrived at the scene and said, and the officer says, well, where's the registration? Was your license plate stolen? And Ed Campbell, without hesitation, without warning, draws a .38 that he'd taken, and he fires every single shot in that .38 of those police officers. He hits two of them. It's so surprising, it's so without warning, so without hesitation, that only one of the officers manages to return fire, and that's Lieutenant Dove, the most experienced of those three officers. And his training saved those officers' lives, and they shoot back and they hit Ed Campbell. And as soon as his dad pulls that gun and starts shooting, you'll see Eric Campbell runs. He does not back his father up. Because though Eric is doing what he can to survive and he's trying to appease his dad, there are simply things he won't do. He will not shoot people. He will not kill people for his father. And he runs past him, and the truck is there with the door open, the keys in the ignition. He jumps in the truck and he drives away. And he pulls over after a mile or so, and he pulls down this kind of rocky area they were talking about, bumps a tree. It's not a major accident. The airbag doesn't go off or anything. And he kind of stumbles out of the car, and there's some property of the Faulkners that are on the seat next to him. He kind of grabs it, and he stumbles into the woods. And he sits down, and he sits there for half an hour. And he's trying to think. He's trying to figure out what he's done. And he's ashamed, and he's scared, and he's terrified. And he's thinking, what's happened? And he realizes, I didn't back my dad up. And he's worried, is my dad going to come get me? And he puts the stuff on the ground, takes the gun out, puts it on the ground. There's a tree nearby or something, and kind of leaves it there. And he just wants it to be over, so he starts walking back out of the woods. And when he comes out, he comes on the highway, police arrest him. Now, both Eric and his father were transported back to North Carolina to face charges in this case, and everyone knew at that time that Ed Campbell was the killer. That Ed Campbell did it. And then while we were waiting, Ed Campbell committed suicide. And the state's strategy changed. Ed Campbell left his son holding the bag for things that Ed Campbell did, not things that Eric did. The evidence will show that Eric is not guilty because he didn't intend anyone to be harmed, didn't intend any murder to happen, Didn't intend anything to be stolen, didn't want anything to be stolen. Didn't intend any homes to be broken into, didn't want any homes to be broken into. Didn't intend for houses to be burned down and didn't want any houses to be burned down. Didn't want anyone to hurt any dogs. That he did not have a common plan with his father. That Eric was a witness, a bystander. And the things that he did do, like entering their home, loading the property up, moving the body. All those things he did to survive out of fear. The evidence will show that during this event, Eric Campbell was weak and scared. And he was not mean and cruel. The evidence will show that the sins of the father should not be visited upon the son. And at the close of the evidence, we will ask you to find Eric Campbell not guilty. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take note of the seat in which your president is sitting. When you're in this courtroom, that is your seat to the exclusion of everyone else. We're going to take our morning recess at this point. During our morning recess period, you duty not to talk among yourselves about this case. It's your duty not to talk to the parties, the witnesses, or the lawyers about anything at all. Further duty not to talk to anyone else, allow anyone else to talk with you or say anything in your presence about this case. If you hear or anyone speaks to you or provides you with any information about this case during this time, you need to let the sheriff know about it immediately when you come back into the courtroom. Don't do any individual research or investigation on your own about any issue touching on this trial. Stay away from your smartphones. You haven't heard any evidence. You've heard the open statements of counsel, but again, that's not evidence in this case. It proves nothing. So do not form or express any opinion about this case during this time. With that, while everyone else for remains seated, I'm going to excuse the 18 of you and ask that you return and assemble in the jury room. If you want to be back there, you'll be fine. If you want to go outside, that's fine too. But I'm going to ask that you return and assemble in the jury room about 25 minutes to the hour of 12. We go by that clock even if it's wrong. We have to have a standard, and that's ours. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'll excuse the 18 of you, but everyone else before remains seated. Provide them with bag if you want to this time. That would be appropriate if they're going to leave. Again, you don't have to go back there if you don't want to. If you want to go somewhere else, you're free. He's going to give you a badge. Right behind you.